So we're going to get started with some really quick introductions. We'll talk about who's on the panel, and as they're introducing themselves, we'll talk about what they're going to be bringing as far as perspectives today. So I'll just start real quick. Matt Rich with PwC. I'm our Pharma Life Sciences Cloud and Digital Leader, which means I wake up every day thinking about cloud and how it help pharma clients use the cloud more effectively. So I'll go to my left here with Brooks.
Thanks, Matt. My name is Brooks Fowler. I'm the head of our clinical data strategy and operations group at AbbVie. I'm a business user of applications that are either software as a service or presented by our IT organization. We're responsible for acquiring data that are generated from the research clinicians around the world for our clinical trials. And we'll be sharing some experiences. I think most of my answers will be based on experience rather than theory.
Good morning, I'm Tim Coleman. I'm actually in transition in terms of my role. Work for Eli Lilly and Company. I have been Vice President and Information Officer for Medicines Development. My group provides the information and digital solutions that support clinical development, product development, and the technology that enables our regulatory interactions, pharmacovigilance, product registration. I'm in transit to a new role as Chief Technology Officer for Lilly, where I'll manage the global infrastructure, enterprise architecture, and our capability center in India.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Wes Barnes. I work at Pfizer. I am the Senior Director of Digital Hosting Solutions. So I'm in the infrastructure space at Pfizer. I'm responsible for all of our hosting environments globally, which includes cloud solutions, data center technologies, and edge hosting solutions as well. So I support, in my role, every line of business across Pfizer, whether it's research, development, commercialization, manufacturing, enabling functions, all of it. I'm actively leading a program that we call the Modernization Factory at Pfizer, and over the past 8 months, we've moved 75% of Pfizer's infrastructure to the native public cloud to AWS. So we're now in the process of working with each of those divisions to figure out how they can take full advantage of the capabilities that we've introduced to them. So great to be here.
Good morning, I'm Nicole Quash, and I head development systems at Gilead. And what that means is basically my group enables the technology for all of development and the systems that we use. So that includes clinical data science, regulatory affairs, clinical systems, and some other internal application areas like SharePoint and systems built in that platform. So very happy to be here and speak with you today.
Thank you, panelists. And we're really happy to be able to have such a good group of innovative leaders here to talk about cloud, and we'll just get right to it. So I think it's fair to say it's been an interesting few years in the pharma life sciences area, probably the most exciting time in our careers. Not only is the excitement from the innovation on the therapy side, but also innovation on the technology side. And we're going to talk about how the technology is basically driving innovation on the therapy side. So we'll start off across the panelists talking about their experiences with cloud-native solutions and how that is changing how they deliver innovation to the business functions, business outcomes. So I'll start with Tim first. Tim, maybe you could just talk a little bit about how you're using cloud-native services to deliver those outcomes and how that's different than it was just a few years ago.
Well, thanks, Matt. And I would agree with you. It's a very exciting time to be where we're at, kind of in the midst of scientific revolution, medical revolution, and also the tech revolution. We're cloud first, as I'm sure many in the room are. We're experiencing many of the same benefits as I'm sure you are in terms of accessibility in a network business model, continuity and high availability, and also performance. I think the big change for us is a focus on acceleration. Or speed. Clearly we can do things now that used to take, in some cases, months to achieve. We can do it now in weeks and days, and in some cases, maybe even hours. And I think it's not just about the cloud transformation, that's the foundation of it, but it's also an agile change as well, thinking differently in terms of achieving speed to value. And so, bottom line, speed has been very important to us. I should probably say why speed is important from a pharmaceutical context. It takes on average 10 to 12 years to bring a new medicine to the marketplace. And Lilly actually had a significant effort several years ago to improve the cycle time of our late-stage development in half. Pretty ambitious goal. Fortunately, we are close to achieving that objective. And just as the business is moving at a much faster pace, enabled by technology, we also have to move at a much faster pace. So speed is the key change for us.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about that speed theme a little bit more. You know, Wes, obviously a lot's been happening at Pfizer in the last couple of years. Maybe you could kind of talk about how some of that was possible using some of the cloud technologies.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Just to echo what Tim has said, cloud for us means all of those things. It's certainly doing it better, faster, cheaper. Coming off the success of our COVID program in 2021, it was evident to us that we've reached a new normal in terms of the pace of innovation that Pfizer would need to maintain going forward. We were not going back. In fact, Albert has challenged us to accelerate the pace of innovation, to go faster than we did in 2021. And the only way to do that is through digital systems and through modern cloud technologies. What's really interesting for us is, besides some of the obvious things, and again, everyone in this room understands the benefits of cloud, Pfizer is looking at the use of cloud to develop new therapies, things that wouldn't be possible without some of these technologies. We're putting a lot of energy and effort into digital medicines, which is the concept of creating things that, through mobile technologies or wearable devices could help diagnose or treat conditions potentially. So these are things that just wouldn't be possible without modern cloud technology.
Thank you, Wes. And Nicole, would love to get your perspective, being the Gilead representative, and how you're really innovating.
So at Gilead, we're using the cloud to innovate, but when we think about innovation, there is the go faster, which I think all of us are doing here, and we need to do that in our market. But we're also thinking about, how do we bring that innovation to our patients? How do we create a better patient experience through innovation? So we're developing solutions on the cloud, thinking about patient first. How do we make it so that maybe they don't have to go to a site, but we have some technology that they can use to be part of our clinical trials and get a better experience overall? We want to be able to track their feedback and really have a continuous feedback loop for improvement, not only for us, because we're developing the drugs, but also from our patients who are going to benefit from our drug development.
Thanks, Nicole. And Brooks, why don't you round us off here?
Yeah, sure. So the requirements for data collection over the past 5 years have changed drastically. So innovation isn't really a nice to have for us. It's required to do business. Specifically, there's a concept called decentralized clinical trials. And what this means is we would like to do as much of the clinical trial at home with a patient versus having them come into a research center to undergo exams and procedures. So there's been a proliferation of digital health tools on the market. We're using them, which has introduced the requirement to capture streaming data, much higher volumes of data. So cloud-native technologies have given us the ability to be successful at that versus the on-premise systems that we had prior. In fact, we're just moving into a new system that will give us much better capabilities, whereas the earlier system would have shut us down in some respects, simply because we couldn't consume the data that we needed to consume.
Thanks, Brooks. So when you think about a lot of the answers or the perspectives up here around acceleration, what that means is, if we can accelerate using technology, it gets some of these really innovative therapies to patients faster. That's why we do this. I mean, it's great to be able to have the technologies, but the end goal is to get things done quickly, get them into the patient's hands. So let's move on. So when we're going to start drilling down into a bit more detail now. So when we talked about at a high level what's happening in the pharmaceutical industry with cloud and how it's transforming how we approach solutions, let's talk a little bit about the functions that are going to benefit most. And Wes, I'll start with you. Maybe you could just talk about some of the functions that you support that are seeing the biggest benefit.
Yeah, I mean, we've been using cloud for certainly the better of 10 years, probably longer. And I mean, at this point, every business function across Pfizer is using cloud in a really big way. That's not to say that we've figured it all out or we've wrung every bit of value out of it. I mean, there's lots to do for sure, but the fact that every division is using it, I think, is a testament to the fact that people get that this has got great value. But as I alluded to earlier, I think the thing for me that's really exciting is this concept of digital medicines and digital capabilities as new ways to connect with patients and approaches that just weren't imaginable a couple of years ago. So using new customer experience capabilities, wearable devices, mobile devices, being able to connect with patients at their home without having them to go to a provider to potentially diagnose and treat and perhaps even companion some of our traditional therapies is really, really exciting. It's something that without, I think, some of the modern cloud technologies available to us, wouldn't be possible. So it's incredibly exciting what we're seeing.
Thanks, Wes. And Nicole, would love to get your perspective as well, because you're serving a very specific, important function. How has things changed for you?
Yeah. So for us, just as Wes mentioned, all of our functional areas are using cloud, but the ones that are benefited from it the most are the areas where we need to be faster and that we need to innovate, where we need to have the ability to spin up an environment, do a test, fail or succeed, and then spin it down. So we're taking advantage of that largely in our areas where we're focusing on data and analytics and those functional areas, particularly around clinical data science, where we have volumes of data from real-world evidence, from clinical trials, and how do we put all of that together to gain insights and tell that story? And that is where we're seeing a huge benefit from the cloud and being able to use that.
Thanks, Nicole. So, we've heard a little bit about all the functions can benefit, but analytics, insights, acceleration, those functions are benefiting most. One of the really difficult things, though, is to tie that back to tangible ROI. Right? It's great to talk about this, but getting folks to see it, to see the value is challenging. So Tim, maybe you could talk a little bit about how you have had success measuring and even telling the story of ROI.
Yeah, I think some of my folks in the room, and they'll tell you that I always tell them to lead with value, that without that value, without that business context, the technology really has no value and no benefit to the organization. From an ROA perspective, we still use net present value. It's a part of our annual business planning process, and finance is a part of that process, and NPV is a part of their language, right? So NPV is critical to getting approval for new initiatives. I think where it changes and where we pivot is after we receive approval, we work very closely with our business partners towards more tangible measures of value. In our part of the business, we talk about it from three perspectives. How do we do more, cost less, and go faster? Do more speaks to scale, speaks to higher throughput of the business process. Obviously, cost and going faster and speed are pretty self-explanatory. The area that I'm really interested in, Matt, is patient experience. I believe that patient experience is going to be the key differentiator in our space in the future, especially as we do more with digital health and digital medicine. And that's something that we would like to learn more about at Lilly. How do we measure patient experience? How do we measure differentiating? How do we tell that we're differentiating our patient experience from others?
Yeah, that's a great point, because a lot of what we talked about so far is benefiting or accelerating the internal process within your companies. Obviously, the patient is why we do this. So, maybe Brooks, I know we're a little off script here, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how you see, cloud changing the patient experience. You talked about decentralized trials earlier. Maybe you could expand on that.
Yeah, certainly. So, clinical trials are basically a science experiment, and the science experiment spans many different geographies, thousands of potential patients. If you've ever had a loved one who's gone through a clinical trial, you know that it's not easy. These folks have to travel very long journeys to get to clinics, because clinics aren't close in many cases, in fact, in most cases. So coming in for a procedure is an arduous journey. And the procedures themselves are not pleasant, as you can imagine in some cases. So what we really want to be able to do is to ease the burden on the patients, to make it easier for them to participate in the trial, to gain the benefits. So doing as many visits at home as possible, or collecting as much data at home as possible, so that those on-site visits are less frequent and less burdensome, and ultimately easier for the patient to endure, making it such that we don't lose patients during a trial because they just couldn't fit it into their life.
Thank you, Brooks. And Wes, I know you talked earlier about digital health and digital medicine. Maybe you could just kind of round this one off, talking about like how is that going to be enabled and what's the ROI to the patient?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer. It's not an easy problem to solve. It's a lot, I think, as Tim suggested, which is it's how do we measure the experience that the patient is having? And are we making the experience better for that patient? Are we reducing the burden for them to get the treatments that they need? Are we seeing lower reoccurrence of issues? So I mean, I think there's a variety of things that we need to look at. It's not an easy one to solve, for sure. It's going to take time to figure it out.
Thanks,
To
Wes.
add just a little bit to
For
that
sure.
as well. So from our perspective and looking at the patient and everything that my fellow panelists said, 100% agree with, but we're also looking at the patient, and not just from an ROI perspective for Gilead in our drug development, but how do we change that experience and reach out to a more diverse patient population? How do we get those patients who really aren't comfortable with clinical trials, or how do we get investigators to participate and talk to people and help them understand more about what the clinical trial can offer them for these marginalized areas? So as using the cloud, part of what we're hoping to do is to be able to also reach out to those diverse patient populations. And that should also transform not only the patient experience, but also the drugs that we're developing, so that we actually are developing drugs that are going to be meaningful and impactful to all populations. So that's also another area.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is in the past, it was really hard to even find the right populations. Now that we have better analytics, better access to different communities, kind of know where some of these pockets are, but actually getting them engaged and getting them to trust being in a clinical trial is a big part of the journey. Nicole, would want to stay with you as we move along here. So now we're going to kind of get into how do we think about do we need to buy something that's an off-the-shelf solution? How do we use cloud with that, or do we just go cloud native when we need to build something new and innovative? So maybe you can tell me about your approach at Gilead.
So for our approach, it's a combination of all. And at times it makes sense to buy something. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are a lot of great tools in the market that serve our purposes. And when that happens, we'll purchase that tool. When we're looking at cloud and specifically building something new, we want to build something new that's going to be either innovative for us, that's going to help improve our internal users, our business, give them some efficiencies, operational efficiencies that maybe we can't get from other tools. And then we have other times where we will look for a off-the-shelf solution or a SaaS offering, but we might need to integrate with various data sources internally. And in that case, we would combine a cloud solution to do that, to do the integration, to partner with a solution we found. So for us, it's a combination of all of those things, and it's just a matter of what problem we're trying to solve and what is the best solution for that at the time.
And maybe, Tim, you can build on that. I know that you guys have made some very strategic decisions about how you buy more operational systems versus how you use cloud. Maybe you could take us through that.
Sure. I think at Lilly, we were amongst the first in the pharma industry to leverage software as a service. The business transformation initiative I mentioned earlier about improving the cycle time of late-stage development really drove us in that direction. And our network model made that almost an imperative for us. And we've been very pleased with the outcome there. We're now shifting our attention. We still have a bit more work to do in that space, but we're shifting our attention more to cloud-native development. Our focus is more on innovation, specifically automation and advanced analytics. And we're learning a lot. We're growing. And I'm expecting that we will be fully cloud here in the next few years.
Can I add a point to that, Matt, if I could? Sure. And I agree with everything Nicole and Tim has said here. And certainly the idea that putting your energy into building things that have competitive advantage is the sweet spot for cloud native. We've seen a massive growth of software development across Pfizer over the past couple of years in every division imaginable. In fact, I think the area that's most surprising is the massive growth of software development in manufacturing, taking advantage of IoT capabilities that didn't exist a couple of years ago. So, I think if I could leave everyone with one thing, it would be, double down on software development. Use software development, use cloud native capabilities to build the things, build solutions to solve problems that you just could not do without those capabilities previously.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not the same software development as it was before the availability of cloud native services, right? So the services allow you to get pretty far down the path towards a solution. It's not like you have to develop all this from scratch anymore. It's an unfair advantage to get to the solution. So cloud engineering has changed the game. Brooks, and maybe you can round this one off. I know you just went live recently with kind of an operational system, and maybe talk about how you're going to plug some innovation around that.
Yeah, certainly. Two examples. So when we do acquire data, we have to structure that data in such a way that it can be analyzed by our statisticians and then ultimately submitted to the FDA. Every trial is different, meaning the data that we collect is of high variety and structured differently. A lot of work goes into ETL. As you can imagine, we have large teams. Up until this point, our technology for ETL has been pretty archaic, very burdensome for the people who are doing the job. So one thing that we're doing is, with the new system, introducing AI to actually predict the mappings from the data collected by the research clinician into that standard structure, which is reducing the time immensely for those individuals to perform the work and ultimately gaining us some operational efficiencies. We can deploy those individuals to work on other projects. So it's definitely a very large operational gain for us.
Yeah, back to those benefits. So now as we look to the future, we all have had experiences on this panel of using cloud, but I think we'd all agree it's just the start. Right? It's not like this is ingrained in everything we do yet, even though it feels like it's becoming that. Where do we go next? And maybe Wes, we'll start with you. What's your next priority for business transformation as you look to the future? Obviously pretty important for Pfizer.
Yeah, there's a lot more value to be found here. And as I said at the onset, we've moved 75% of Pfizer's environment to the public cloud over the past year. So we've risen all boats with the tide, so to speak, and taken a lot of sort of the traditional excuses on why they can't leverage cloud because we've got network latency or co-location issues or other things. Everything is now in the cloud and everything is on relatively modern platforms, even if the applications themselves have not been effectively modernized. So I think the next push for us is in a couple of areas. It's looking at the key business processes that we care the most about and that deliver the greatest outcomes for patients and focusing modernization efforts there, whether it's pharmacovigilance or whether it's clinical trials or research or manufacturing, picking out those things and trying to infuse as much modern capability there to make those things faster, more efficient, better experiences, I think is the next step. And we're halfway there now that we've got capabilities in place to help do that. I think the other thing is starting to leverage common platforms across the enterprise. Pfizer is terrible at this to some extent. We probably all experience this in the sense that people build a lot of the same things over and over again and have for years. We're now in a position with a common set of native cloud tools to build a common set of platforms that everyone can take advantage of and build upon to get the outcomes they want without reinventing the wheel every single time. So I think there's an opportunity here to focus on critical business processes that really deliver maximum value for Pfizer and for patients, while also, again, kind of rising the tide for all boats and driving efficiency across the enterprise.
Thanks, Wes. You know, you're in a kind of a fun part of your journey. It's now time to modernize, which is the exciting part. Nicole, maybe you could kind of expand on how you see your next priorities.
So for us, there are a couple of areas that are really key next priority areas. One is around increasing our focus around advanced analytics, so using AI and machine learning to gain information and additional insights that will be valuable for us. So that is a real strong push and a focus for us right now. The other area that we're looking at is innovation around clinical trials. How can we use the cloud to develop solutions that our clinical trials are a little bit more innovative, a little bit more flexible, and really help us move faster and also attract the right patients for those trials as well. So those are key areas where we're looking to focus next.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely huge value. You know, Tim, since you kind of threw us a curveball earlier with, value to the patient, which is, again, top priority. Maybe, since you've done some thinking about that recently, maybe you could talk about that specifically and how that's going to become more of a priority than it already is.
Well, first, I would echo some of the comments that have been made. I think automation and advanced analytics, those are going to be two places we're going to be doing work on for some time. And I'm excited about the shift in automation from RPA and chatbots to more intelligent automation. One area of interest for me is natural language generation, which I think has great promise in terms of auto generation of content and reports and documents. So intelligent automation will be big. Advanced analytics, we're seeing the shift from prescriptive. I think very soon we'll be talking about prescriptive, from predictive to prescriptive analytics. And then on the patient side, we're doing a lot of decentralized trials. That's now the way. That's now the paradigm in which we run trials. I think the next evolution will be what we call connected trials. It's the use of medical-grade devices to collect data real-time and continuously during trials. I think we've got about 20 or so trials where we're using medical devices, and see that as an area of promise as we continue in this decentralized focus.
Thanks, Tim. And Brooks, I know we've talked before about your imaging use case. Maybe you could talk about how that may be expanded in the future, because that's a very interesting part of your business.
Yeah, certainly. We acquired Allergan in 2021. They're the creators of Botox, but they have, or we now have, very large, diverse set of therapies that we're both working on and have come into the industry or are commercialized at this point. We have the largest body and facial aesthetics clinical photography cache in the industry. We unfortunately have those stored with third-party providers in different places, and we're paying for storage, management, and retrieval when we need to use those images. So there's direct cost associated there. What we've been able to do and what we're going to be able to do is to pull all of those images into a central repository, catalog those, tag them appropriately, de-identify the photographs, and then be able to use advanced analytics and AI to show progression of aging, the effects of the therapies that we're applying on each of the patients. And there's the direct cost that we're avoiding by storing the data, and then now we can not have to experience the opportunity cost associated with not being able to gain insights from the analysis of those images. So we see huge benefit, and when you talk about speed, it's really about being able to gain insights so that we can design those clinical trials or those very sophisticated experiments quicker, and then close them down quicker so that the commercial gain can be realized.
Thanks.
And everyone can look better.
So a lot of innovation, still to find. The last topic before we go to questions from the audience is really around people, right? the most important part to making this happen isn't just the services, it's the people to put the services together to do something innovative. And this is a real challenge, not just for pharma, for every industry. And as Wes said earlier, engineering talent, development talent is key to Pfizer and is key to others on the panel. What are our plans for finding, retaining, attracting this kind of talent? Nicole, maybe I'll start with you.
Sure. So, very timely question, because we're actually in the process of looking for resources to enhance our cloud area. So we've recently hired additional AWS architects, and we're reskilling the staff that we have in some areas. Historically, before the cloud, everybody was trained on how do I build this server, how do I set up this environment. Now that it's ready for you, we want to make sure people understand how to work in that area. So recently, what we've done in a reskilling effort is we opened up various AWS training courses from the beginning, just to entry level, all the way up to some of the more advanced courses, and we just made them available to those who were interested, and then those who actually had a role that they would be working on the cloud. So that's an area that we're continuing to train and grow our resources, but we are also looking for talent. And now, since cloud didn't really exist as strongly years ago, now you see people coming out of universities with master's degrees in cloud and things like that. So we are looking to target those individuals as well.
Yeah, thanks, Nicole. And maybe just one question to you. So finding them is one thing. How do you keep them happy? Like, how do you keep them engaged?
Because Gilead's a great place to work. No, we really do. Well, yeah, you do have to pay them. But it's not just about that. It's also giving them exciting opportunities to work on. People want to work on things that are interesting, that feel like they make a difference. So if they can see where they are either touching a patient, because all of us have either been a patient or known a patient, or they're working on something that's new and innovative that hasn't been done, they're motivated by that challenge, as well as the other benefits that come with pay and other things. But really, it's trying to get them engaged in things that are meaningful.
Yeah, having a sense of purpose in your work, right? That's the really fun thing about working in this industry.
Yeah, if I can, I love, Nicole, the way you described it. And I'd answer it, Matt, if I could, in two dimensions. First, in terms of finding and keeping talent. I couldn't agree more, Nicole, with what you said in terms of, I almost feel like we're in a bit of a hiring revolution across pharma, and I'm sure my friends here can attest to it. I mean, what we've been through over the past couple of years, I think, has sort of opened folks' eyes to the power, the promise of what pharma can do for people's lives in terms of just, improving the lives of the people we care about. So I've seen an enormous number of folks that want to come work for Pfizer specifically, not just because of the technologies that we're adopting, but because of the purpose that we have in terms of changing patients' lives. And we've in fact stolen plenty of people from Amazon. I shouldn't say that too loudly in the room here, but people from Amazon who want to come work at Pfizer to bring their technical expertise because they find purpose in our mission and they're connected to the mission and they want to be part of it, which is unbelievable to say. And it's been really exciting. So, I think finding people and keeping people motivated has been almost easier now than it's ever been for us because of the confluence of what we've done as an industry and the technologies that we're adopting. The second dimension is, for us anyway, it's about how we organize our talent and how we get the work done. And we've been on a mission over the past year or so to adopt more of an agile product model, which I think lets us take this talent and organize it in such a way where we're really clear on accountability. We're really quick in terms of delivering new capabilities through agile methodologies, and we organize in a way that helps people continue to get the skills that they need to grow and to provide great outcomes for us. So it's been a really exciting time.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
If I could jump in, I think we've had a few Pfizer folks come to Lilly, so thank you very much. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. You teed that up, so.
We're not supposed to be starting fights today.
But no, I like what Nicole talked about in terms of meaningful work. I think that's at the heart of it. I would also add meaningful development, and so we are doubling down on our upskilling and development for our tech employees within the company. And I think we've shifted, into a paradigm of continuous learning, where we always have to be ready ready to do the work that is important for today, but also thinking about what's the work that we got to do next year and a couple years out, and how are we preparing ourselves as tech professionals for that. And so we've made some very targeted investments. We've acquired a e-learning platform specifically for tech that has very rich tech content, and people can leverage that e-learning platform whenever they need in terms of upskilling themselves. We've also developed a partnership with Purdue University. We're actually sponsoring 12-month apprenticeship experiences where people can learn about software engineering in the cloud, data engineering, advanced analytics and data sciences, user experience is just a few examples, and I think that partnership is bearing fruit. It's also challenging the universities to start thinking differently. It's not just about the four-year degree, but how do they continue to engage their alumni in terms of upskilling, particularly in the computer science and in the tech areas.
That's a great point, because that wasn't really available before. And Brooks, you have a unique perspective coming from the business side, right? You have to have folks that know how to do their business functional work, but they also have to be a little more fluent in technology, almost a bilingual. How are you handling that?
So historically, the clinical data management domain has been somewhat transactional. No real need to gain insights, just react to what's being collected and make sure that the data are clean at the end of the day. The advent of new technology, especially in analytics and automation, has given us the opportunity to push some of that transactional effort into automation. We still have transactional work that we have to do, and people have to do it, but it's being minimized. So what we're doing is looking for people that have analytic capabilities. So where I may have had an English lit major at some point in the past doing that transactional work, I now have an economist, I have several engineers, I have data scientists, I have bachelor's level statisticians, and they all seem to have just an innate ability to think critically, which is so important. They need to understand what they're seeing, they need to be able to interpret it, act on it, but they also need to be able to come up with solutions. Solutions for process, solutions for technology, and you're right, they need to be fluent in all of our technologies because we are a very technology-heavy organization.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for your perspectives on the people side of things.